Hello, welcome back to making the red and pink Christmas tree inspired costume. In this video I'm going to be showing you how to cover a strapless bra in lycra. I'm going to be using the same pink lycra that we used to make the underwear in part 2 so that this becomes a matching set. This is the strapless bra that I'm going to be covering. This was $10 from Kmart and it's a nice plain smooth base for me to put my lycra over. I've taken the straps off because I'm not going to use those. At the minute there's still a little loop of elastic just here, which is where the straps hook on. I don't need that, so I'm going to cut that off. I'm also going to cut the label out so it doesn't get in the way. To cover your bra, you're going to need your lycra, so you need something with a good amount of stretch to it. And you'll need needles, pins, threads, scissors, all of the usual sewing supplies. You're going to need a sewing machine that either does a straight stretch stitch or a zigzag stitch. But there's not a lot of machine sewing. This is going to be quite a lot of hand sewing. And you'll also need some paper and a pencil because we're going to make a little pattern for covering the back part. Before you start covering your bra, make note of which hook that it does up on you. I'm going to do this one so it does up on the end hook here, so the loosest hook. So I'm going to cover it right up to that hook and I'm going to cover the whole of this back part here, which means that there's almost none of the nude colour showing once it's pink. You can leave the whole of the eye end uncovered, but it means that if you do it up on a looser hook than the tightest one, that you're going to see quite a lot of that. So I always try and work out which hook my client's going to be wearing it on and then just cover it to that hook so there's minimal amount of the original colour showing. There's all different ways you can cover this. If you look at bras that people have covered, everyone seems to have their own way of doing it. This is how I prefer to do it. So I'm going to do this one in 3 sections because I find that that gives me the neatest finish. So the first section I'm going to do is to make a sort of a cover for this part, which will come up to just past where the underwire starts. I'm then going to cover the cups. And then the final piece will be a bit that goes from one side to the other in the centre there, which will cover the underwire and this centre part and then the bottom. So there is a lot of hand sewing. Pretty much the back part's the only machine sewing. It's tricky to get bras underneath your machine, and because you've got a metal underwire in there, the chances of hitting it are quite high. But that's just me. Again, other people do it different ways, but this is my method for covering a bra. So to cover my ends, I'm going to make a quick pattern just by drawing around them. So I'm going to hold that in place. I'm not stretching it, or I'm just holding it smooth. You can pin this to your ironing board like we did for the knickers if you want to help hold it down while you draw it. And then I want it to end just past there, so I'm just going to stop it here. So that's my pattern for covering the back parts. I'm going to add my 1 centimetre seam allowance on both sides and at the end. Then I'm just going to turn my bra around and then mark the length I need to do for the side with the eyes because it's a little bit longer. So I actually need to come out to about there for that side. This is my finished pattern piece with my 1 centimetre seam allowance added around all of the edges. I'm now going to cut 2 pieces of lycra for each side of the bra. So 1 pair will be cut to the hook length and 1 pair will be cut to the eye length. So here's both of my end pieces cut and pinned right sides together. Now at each end, what I've done is I've folded back the 1 centimetre seam allowance and pinned it in place. And I'm now going to stitch my 1 centimetre along both sides, but I'm not going to stitch the ends. We need to leave the ends open to get the eyes and the hooks of the bra through. I use a straight stretch stitch for this. That's a machine stitch where it does 2 stitches forward and 1 back, so it gives you a straight stitch, but it's still really stretchy. If your machine doesn't have that, you can just use a really small zigzag stitch, but we need this to be as stretchy as the back of the bra is still. Both pieces are sewn together now, and you can see using that straight stretch stitch that it's still really, really stretchy. But it's a really strong stitch as well. It doesn't come undone very easily. In fact, if you ever need to unpick it, it's really tricky. Next, I'm just going to trim away my seam allowance here, quite close to the stitching, just to reduce any bulk when we put it onto the bra. Now they're trimmed, I'm going to turn them in the right way. So this is my eye end and that's my hook end. So I'm going to take my eye end first. Now it's in the right way, I can just slide it up over the back of the bra. I'm literally just sliding the bra strap into it. So I want this open end to line up as close as possible to the eyes so that we can still do the bra up, but we want to cover as much as the original colour as we can. I'm just going to use a couple of clips to hold it in place. You can use pins as well if you prefer. And then coming up along, I'm just going to make sure my seams are right on the very edges. And I'm going to pin or clip that into place as I go as well. If your lycra looks a bit baggy at the minute, don't worry about it, because once this is pulled straight when you're wearing it, it's going to sit nice and flat. Just tuck it under a tiny bit at the end of the seam there, because on the inside we want to just fold that under and get a nice clean finish. I'm going to have to use pins here because I can't get my clips up that far. So that's how it looks on the inside with it folded underneath. Again, it looks baggy, but it will sit neatly when it's pulled tight. I don't want to fold it under here because I don't want it to get too bulky. All right, I'm just going to pin the other end on as well, and then I'll show you where I'm up to. Okay, that's the other end pinned in place as well. So that's what we're looking like at the minute. Next, it's time to start hand sewing. We need to sew this end and this end into place. So nothing that we're sewing now is stretchy. The stretchy bit's done, so that makes it a little bit easier. So you just want to hand stitch all along here, hand stitch along the inside, making sure you keep that seam allowance tucked in and under, because that's going to be your finished look on the inside there. And when you get to the hook end, you need to sew along the very edge on the outside. And then on the inside, you need to pop this in underneath the hook so you can still do your bra up. Sometimes I find I need to just use some pliers just to open it up a little bit. So we're going to hand stitch there and then do the same on the other end. So hand stitch inside, outside, and then hand stitch at the hook end all the way around, keeping it lined up with the bottom of the hooks. So that will give us the least amount of the original colour showing possible. In the future, if you do need to change which eye you do it up on, sometimes bras stretch out a bit and get a bit loose, you can just undo this stitching and then fold it or cut it and move it along to where the eye that you need to use. Here's our bra with those end pieces sewn on now. So I've hand stitched down the front without the seam allowance folded in. I've hand stitched down the inside, that's with the seam allowance folded in. And this is how our hook and eye looks. So that's the hook side, which is completely covered from the outside. The eye side, you can see, you can still get to the eyes to do it up. And that's the hooks on the inside. So I've pulled the lycra in underneath the hooks. I've just opened them up a tiny bit with a pair of pliers so they can still do up easily. That's how it looks when it's done up. So you can see very minimal amount of the original bra colour showing, but it does up and undoes nice and easily. Next, we're going to cover the cups. So I'm going to take a piece of lycra. I've just got an offcut here that's kind of the right shape and size. And you're going to lay it over your cup. And you need to pin it on while stretching it a little bit. Don't stretch it too much. If you stretch it too much, it's going to squish your cup and make it flat. So you need to pull it tightly enough that it sits neatly and smoothly over your cup, but not so tight that it's squashing it out of shape. This bra is a 10B, so the cups aren't very big, but what you'll find if you're doing bigger, curvier cups, that you will end up with an overlap. So even with stretching it and using a stretch fabric, you will end up with an overlap. So you can either make a little pleat somewhere and stitch it down, or you can do a little bit of gathers, or you can make a sort of deliberate feature and do a couple of pleats. If you want to hide the pleat, have a think about where you're going to put your embellishments. For example, if you're putting lace around the bottom of your cups, you can make sure the pleats are at the bottom so that the lace then hides those when you sew it on. Lay your fabric over your cup and then just sort of start pinning and stretching. But yeah, don't stretch too much. So I'm going to start in the centre. I'm going to pin the bottom and then the top, sort of working quarters I find helps, and then I can pull it to one side and then to the other side. You can see it's starting to take shape around the shape of the cup here. And then if you find you're getting too much fabric in one spot, or if it's not where you want it to be to hide it later, you can kind of move it around and keep stretching. So I'm just going to sort of stretch this area out and just keep pinning it. It's looking like I'm going to be able to get this pretty smooth because it is a smaller cup size. But if I do end up with any excess, I'm going to aim to have it at this top side of the cup, because that's where I'm going to be putting some big stones. Oh, I've just stabbed myself and got some blood on it. Oh no, I might have to move this whole thing up. So I'm happy with that. I am just going to redo it off camera just to move it away from that bit that I've just bled on. Once you're happy with how your lycra is sitting over your cup, you need to trim your excess off. So I've trimmed around where the underwire is, about halfway along the underwire, all the way around. And then along the top, I've left about 1 centimetre or 2 of fabric. To finish the top, I'm just going to fold my end in there and then do a double fold to get us a nice neat finish on the inside of the cup. And these little clips are really useful for this bit, otherwise you find you end up with so many pins in there, it stabs you so easily. Because you're putting a big curve into a smaller curve as you fold this in, you will end up with some pleating in it, some excess fabric. But I just even that out as I sew it. So even though it's looking a bit lumpy now, by the time I sew it on, that'll even that out a lot. And again, at the side, just fold your edge under and then do your double fold to get that neat finish on the corner here. So that's how it's looking on the inside and the outside. So now I'm going to hand stitch all around here, keeping that edge about in the middle of where the underwire is, and then hand stitch down along the inside here, just evening out any excess fabric as I stitch it. I've got the fabric stretched and stitched onto both cups now, so that's how it looks on the outside and the inside. So the last piece I need to cut is a single piece that will come all the way around under the cup, across the middle and under this cup. So it's going to stop at each end about where I've got those pins. So I'm going to make another quick pattern so I can cut the piece of lycra to go there. So I've just taken a piece of paper and cut a rough shape and cut a bit of a curve out, and I've just made some little cuts in it so I can get it sitting where I need it to sit. And I've drawn on here where I need to mark so you can sort of see where I'm going. So I've got my centre front, the side where it's finishing, and then that's the top of the underwire. So now I can lay this piece of paper on there, mark my centre front, and then I can sort of do by feel, I can mark where the top of that underwire is. So this is the cup side of the underwire that I'm drawing. And I'm drawing my side seam is, where my seam's going to go, and then the shape along the bottom of the bra. It's hard doing things like this while reaching around the camera and my light. That looks pretty good. I'm going to cut this out with this part on the fold. I'm going to cut an extra 2 centimetres along the bottom and 1 centimetre here, and then just a minimal amount along here to turn underneath. This is my final piece of lycra, all marked and ready to fold and sew on. So I'm just going to fold this edge under just to my marks there. I find if I put the marks on it, I can line everything up better as I attach it. So that's going to go right at that end of my underwire. And these are going to go at the centre front. Some people do this in a lot fewer pieces, but I like doing it this way because it still looks like a bra when it's done. It still shows that nice underwire shape. So this bit's done a lot by feel. You can feel where your actual underwire is to line it up. So now I've got it pinned on around the underwire, I can start folding the other bits into where I want them to finish. This one's going to finish about there. That's about where the stretch starts. And then the excess at the centre front and the side here, you can either fold it to the outside or the inside. And then the excess at the bottom, like the top, will all get folded to the inside and do a double fold and pin. So that's how it's starting to look. I'm going to repeat that on the other side and hand stitch it all into place. The hand sewing is done and the bra is finished. This is how it looks on the outside. Like I said, anything that looks wrinkly now smooths out when it's worn. So if I pull it, you can see that all smooths out nicely. So that's the outside. And that's how it looks on the inside. Again, if I pull it tight, you can see how neat it is. So there you go. That is my method for covering a bra. So here is our finished bra on the mannequin along with the knickers from part 2. This is just one method for covering bras. There's lots of other ways you can do it. I like this method because it's fairly quick, even though there is a lot of hand sewing, and I think it gives a nice neat finish. It doesn't fit very well on this mannequin. My mannequin isn't particularly human shaped, but it's the only one I've got with legs that fit the knickers on. So here's where we're up to so far. We've got the bra, the matching knickers and the corset all done and together. Again, it doesn't fit particularly well on here, but you can get the idea. So now our sort of plain base is done, I can start working on the tulle and the bows and start making it pretty and more Christmas tree-like tomorrow. Thanks for watching, see you in the next part.